To everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone to our All In for Kansas Kids Strengthening Early Childhood in Kansas monthly webinar for May 17th, 2023. My name is Julia Gruss. I am a research project specialist at the University of Kansas's Center for Public Partnerships and Research, and I will be your webinar facilitator for today. I am also joined by two of my CPPR colleagues, Steph Sloan and Lindsay O'Ryan. Steph is going to be our presenter today, and Lindsay is helping out with some Zoom logistics, and will be posting all relevant links and webinar information into the chat. So if you see anything on my presentation slides that has a link or looks like a link, Lindsay will get that posted into the chat shortly thereafter. Lindsay will also be keeping an eye on the chat feature. So if any of you have any questions or comments, feel free to go ahead and share them there. She will either respond to your question directly if she is able to, or she will interject at the appropriate time during the presentation to ask your question. So again, thank you to everyone for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon. We've got our quick updates here, things that you've all probably heard before. Don't forget that our webinar series is now monthly. So as you can see, our next one is on June 14th. And as always, if you have not done so yet, feel free to sign up for our All In for Kansas Kids e-newsletter. You can do that through the cabinet website. That's the first link that Lindsay will get into the chat for us. And then also happy belated National Provider Appreciation Day. I hope you were all appreciated and were able to appreciate those around you that are wonderful providers and doing wonderful things in childcare in Kansas. We have Steph Sloan today, who's going to be giving us a wonderful and thought-provoking presentation on the Child's Voice Project and how it is strengthening families through legal service interventions. And then after Steph is finished with their presentation, I will jump back in and give you some early childhood systems updates. But without further ado, Steph, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Steph Sloan. I am an associate researcher at the University of Kansas Center for Public Partnerships and Research. I also lead the Child Maltreatment Prevention, which is CBCAP, evaluation process for the Children's Cabinet. So I'm the person behind the scenes, crunching the numbers, conducting the interviews, leading the focus groups. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that we are working on that is related to some of the other Children's Cabinet work that we're doing in a way to provide families with much needed supports and services to help strengthen them and prevent them from having a more difficult time than necessary in the face of crisis. Next slide, please. So legal services is child maltreatment prevention. I really want to talk about why we consider in the state of Kansas that legal services can prevent child maltreatment. So first of all, when people have access to the legal services that they need, they can access their basic needs. So one example of legal services that help retain basic needs would be preventing evictions or debt collection. People find themselves with a number of legal problems and there are limited services and help available. So when we can provide families with legal services that also include a case management component, then they can receive access to wraparound services. It really prevents destabilization that happens when families are facing crisis of any kind. And then also legal services can protect protective factors. It can buffer against those adverse childhood experiences by promoting nurturing and attachment, positive family functioning, scaffolding access to basic needs, and then really providing supportive social networks. Next slide. So the preventative legal services model serves families with young children, which, like many of you, that is who you serve as well. And it really provides families with those extra things that they need that people don't readily think about. So when families are facing a housing crisis, when they're facing debt collection, it can be really difficult to sometimes maintain those or get access to educational benefits such as IEPs. And also thinking about SSI benefits for families who qualify. Getting access to all of those things or preventing problems that result from those things takes a lot of resources and skills. And it also takes knowledge about the legal system and the ability to provide families with support within the legal system. So preventative legal services uses a holistic model, which basically means you get an attorney and or paralegal. That attorney and or paralegal can do things like write letters for you. They can attempt to do a lot of the procedural things that you need to get access to things or prevent access from being taken away. It provides somebody with a client or case manager. So it's a person who is able to help you navigate the social service system. So if you are facing eviction, what other kinds of supportive services can we provide? Do you need access to childcare? Do you need access to other kinds of supports that prevent further destabilization? Because what we know about families is when something happens, when a crisis happens, it often snowballs very quickly into a series of other problems. So preventative legal services, it really aims to prevent that snowball from taking place. It aims to get families access to the things that they need and stabilize them within that access. So they're getting their legal issues attended to while also getting resources for the family. And doing this, we know from a broad base of research, it prevents child maltreatment, it prevents neglect, it prevents food insecurity, and then it also prevents parents using inappropriate parenting or finding themselves in situations that don't allow them to parent in the ways that they find best. So preventative legal services, we consider that in the state of Kansas one option for using prevention services for young children and families. Next slide. In Kansas, we have several preventative legal service projects, and those are funded through CAPTA, which is also community-based prevention grants. That's called CBCAP. And we have a couple of different projects. One of those projects is the Kansas Holistic Defenders. They're located in Douglas County and Shawnee County. This particular service is embedded within early childhood services. So we're partnering in Shawnee County with some early childhood service providers. And as that service provider says, hey, this family has a crisis, this family has a problem, they have just on speed dial, they know where to send these people. They say, okay, I know exactly where you need to go. You need to go to Kansas Holistic Defenders. They have office space in early childhood programs there in Shawnee County and Topeka, and they'll be able to help you with your problems, with your legal problems. And so then you see that child, they're able to show up more consistently to school. The children aren't missing school days or childcare days because of court demands. Families are able to be more consistent and stable with the children and with the things that they need because you were able to send them to Kansas Holistic Defenders to get help with their problems. We also have similar programs with Kansas Legal Services in Finney County. We also have another program called the Family Strong Universal Primary Prevention, and that specifically serves the southeast counties of Kansas, and they partner with Kansas Legal Services. And so essentially all of these legal services are serving to provide holistic preventative legal services to children with young families. Next slide. And I want to talk a little bit about the Family Civil Legal Needs Survey. So when we decide to invest money in something like preventative legal services that is kind of new in the arena of prevention, we have to be able to show that what we are doing is needed and it's working. So one of the things that we did to show that need, to substantiate the reason for investing in preventative legal services, is we designed a survey. And that survey was designed to identify what the legal service needs were for families with young children and quantify the reason for why they need those services. And our key finding in this study, which we had over 600 respondents to the study, we found that custody cases are serving as a catalyst for other court cases. So families with a custody dispute, either they're divorcing or have a child support case or needing a modification to a parenting plan. Those custody cases are the gateway for other kinds of cases. So we found that 93% of our sample identified as having a custody dispute. And then of those portions, almost half of them had a different kind of case along with it. So housing, debt collection, domestic violence, education or SSI benefits. And so what we learned from this study is that there is a wide variety of different kinds of legal problems families are facing in Kansas. We also learned that the primary issue kind of starts as custody cases. And what we know about child custody cases is that they can be really complex and really complicated, and they cause a lot of backlog for the court system in general. Next slide, please. So as a result of these legal problems, we are learning that families have accumulating debt, significant debt. They're losing income due to court demands, and they're experiencing lasting economic insecurity. So as families incur these custody cases or any other kind of legal problem, their credit scores are taking a hit, which then gives them lower borrowing power. It gives them less ability to participate in the buying and selling and the capitalist society that we live in. So they are then experiencing lasting economic insecurity. We also learned that they are having to sell assets. So families that actually start out as economically secure are ending up destabilized because of legal problems. They're having to sell assets. They're having to take on significant amounts of debt. And then they're defaulting on that debt because they cannot afford to pay. They're experiencing loss of income due to court demands. We did find that a portion of the study sample was losing employment altogether due to missed work related to court demands. So having a court case can be excessively time consuming, especially if you can't afford to hire legal support, then you're doing a lot of it yourself. So we found that families were losing income, and we also found that children were missing more days of school because parents were navigating this time burden of attending court dates. We also learned that there's a great deal of housing instability. So, people are experiencing more evictions, more foreclosures. They're also experiencing some issues with just general housing instability. So as rents go up, because of all of the debt that they've accumulated, they aren't able to afford housing. They're also experiencing more food insecurity. And then we also learned that people with legal problems are having to forego paying for vital medical care for themselves and their children because of all of these competing expenses. We learned that they're struggling to parent effectively, that they genuinely want to be good parents. They want to be present. They want to use the best possible parenting strategies. But when you have this impending crisis and this accumulating crisis, it's very difficult to parent effectively. And then we also noted that in the sample, they're experiencing disruptions in social support. So as they accumulate stress, they're actually more disjointed from their social support system. They're experiencing more conflict just within their social support network in general. Next slide. So that said, we conducted a needs assessment. We learned more about the problems that people with legal issues are facing, the consequences of those legal issues. And then we started to partner with what is called the Child's Voice Project. So when we're looking at preventative legal services and just the amount of families and the large amount of burden families are experiencing from legal problems, we often feel kind of helpless because it is a huge problem. How could we possibly curtail that problem? Specifically for children involved in complex custody cases. So we learned through the study that custody cases are actually the gateway into other accumulative legal problems. And 93% of our study sample noted having a child custody case within the last 5 years. And so What do we know about children who are involved in complex custody? We know that they experience significant stress and strain. We know that they accumulate ACEs ranging from tolerable to toxic. We know that the changing family system can be really stressful for children, especially very young children. And then we also know that there are additional stressful factors, like in the previous slide, I talked about just the vast economic destabilization. Then we experience higher rates of child neglect, higher rates of child maltreatment, higher rates of domestic violence. All of that can accumulate and exacerbate stress for children. But what we also know about children, specifically those who are involved in really complex cases of family separation, family destabilization, that they can benefit from agency and developmentally appropriate engagement. So toxic stress can actually be buffered by helping children be more engaged in making meaning and communicating about their lives experiences, even very young children. Next slide. So what is the solution? We've got this complex issue. We have a lot of families facing legal problems. We don't have enough legal services. We don't have enough free legal services. What is the solution? So even though we're investing, there needs to be more solutions specifically for people involved in custody litigation. Well, we have a solution. I'm excited to share it with you. So North Carolina Legal Aid has a project called the Child's Advocate. And essentially, for children involved in complex custody proceedings, they provide an attorney specifically for the child at no cost. It is completely free, and they use a child-centered approach. Just a quick note, I don't want to get too much in the weeds about this, but a child's attorney is different than a best interests attorney or a guardian ad litem. It's different in that the attorney is specifically for the child, and they're able to glean the child's perspective, the child's needs, the child's just in general experiences, and represent that throughout the entire case. And the Child's Voice Project is essentially aiming to determine the feasibility of replicating this approach. Because this approach specifically, it's a gap that we do not currently fill in our service array of preventative legal services. And most states that are doing preventative legal services do not yet have a project like this. So I want to talk a little bit about the project, why it's so unique, and why you might be hearing more about it in Kansas, hopefully in the future. So what does it mean to be child-centered? Being child-centered is centering the child's views and experiences, prioritizing the impacts to the child, giving a child a say in what happens, and then maximizing developmentally appropriate child engagement strategies for problem solving and decision making. Next slide. So we think about child development and capacity. A lot of critics of this model will say, well, children are not necessarily capable of making their own decisions. That is exactly right. Children are not capable of making their own decisions. But we also know that even very young children are able to express their experiences. They're able to tell us about how they feel. Even if we fall short in our ability to interpret that correctly or perfectly, they're still able to convey it. And so just engaging young children in the process of talking about their experiences, of just validating or noticing their experiences and how it might be challenging for them, say, going back and forth between mom and dad's house. I noticed that you have a backpack when you have to go between mom and dad's house, and it seems like it's a struggle for you to carry that backpack back and forth. I noticed that seems really hard for you. Let me see what I can do to help you make that a little easier while you're here within my care. That's just an example of something that we might say. And this is really coming from my experience, both working in the education field as a teacher, but then also working in this arena as a family scientist, helping families adjust and cope in light of divorce, separation. So young children before the age of 6, they really benefit greatly from just being validated, from being heard, from being able to express their experiences. But more so, if they are in a circumstance where there is significant family violence, or they're in a circumstance where they might feel unsafe in their home, they need a place to be able to be heard in their developmentally appropriate way so that they can express what's going on. And one of the, as a person who studies child development as my PhD, one of the biggest myths about children is that they are not accurate reporters of their own experience. I have found that in my research and then across the board with research to be untrue. Even very young children can be accurate in their descriptions of what's happening in their lives. And so when we think about young children, the child's attorney is actually able to supplement some of this very specific child development knowledge and scaffold some of their legal supports and what they need, what the child needs within the circumstance, within a developmentally appropriate way. And once you start to get to middle childhood, age 6 to 8, they actually really drastically increase in their ability to be active participators in their lives. They're starting to develop listening and communication skills. They're developing their metacognition, which is like being able to think about their thinking and critique their own thinking and reasoning. And they also become more adequate in their recall. And so they have a greater awareness of themselves in relation to others in the world. They can consider more than one aspect of a problem. They can demonstrate problem-solving skills. They have better memory, they have more awareness, and they have a developing understanding of fairness and a sense of justice. And I always talk about this piece right here, because if you have spent time with young children, this is the most complicated piece of working with children, is their intense understanding and passion for fairness and a sense of justice. Even if it's imperfect, they feel very strongly about that at a certain age. And it really is a strength, I think, developmentally, but it also can cause adults a lot of inconvenience. It can be very inconvenient to repeatedly have the same conversations with a 6-year-old about what's fair and what isn't, especially if you're in a classroom. But they're also able to develop that empathy and compassion. So even in light of their concrete, fixed way of looking at the world, it's starting to loosen and they're really developing those skills. So when children are in complex custody proceedings and their parents are both represented, it's very contentious, it's very stressful, there's accumulating legal problems within the family system. These children aged 6 to 8, they're starting to generate a more complex view of the world. And we can actually leverage that in a way that builds their protective skills, it buffers the stress and the accumulation of ACEs. So being able to leverage these developmental growth periods can be so important. And a child's attorney is especially astute at doing that. Next slide. Some other things to think about with child development. There are a lot of different theories. Each theory has its own strengths and weaknesses. And I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. You are all people that deal repeatedly with theories of child development. You deal with children each day. Each theory has its own strengths and weaknesses, and every child is incredibly unique. But every child, regardless of where they are in their development, they benefit from being active participants in their lives and being able to identify where they are in their development, their developmental skills and strengths, and leverage that. It will actually give them the skills to maneuver around their challenges and their weaknesses, especially in the face of family challenge, family conflict, family crisis. Next. So thinking about agency and being an active participant in your life as a protective factor. So we know that there are innumerable amounts of stressors that families and children face, many of which we cannot solve for them because some of these problems are just so very complex and deeply seated. We can't possibly solve every problem for every child and every family. But what we can do is at least give them a place to be heard, a way to engage in problem solving and decision making that actually buffers stress and can be a resilience factor for a very long time. So child welfare studies over the length of the last 40 years have really been supporting the use of a child-centered model for improving outcomes for children involved in the child welfare system. So for children that are placed in foster care or have a lot of different foster care placements, some of those problems are so incredibly complex. We cannot necessarily solve those overnight. But what we have learned from using this approach in the child welfare system is that when children are able to be involved as an active participant in their lives, in the decisions that are being made for and about them, that they actually have reductions in dysregulation behavior and they have increases in positive self-perception. So even in the light of all of these difficult circumstances, they're still developing skills and they're still showing some promising and positive outcomes. So for children not involved in the child welfare system, not engaged in foster care, we can apply and use the same practices. And then we can use developmentally appropriate child engagement strategies to develop resilience, even when there is family conflict. We can increase children's coping skills. We can help them learn how to engage in solutions-based thinking. Children can become more effective communicators, be able to express their needs more effectively. And then they develop a sense of self-efficacy. They are actively problem solving. They are active participants in their own lives. So even though their problems cannot be solved right away, they can still feel a sense of agency. They can still feel a sense of being proud of themselves. They can still develop skills. So when we look at crisis and the role of a child's attorney, we can see them as a facilitator of protective factors. Next slide, please. So mitigating undue influence. Okay, so this is a question we get a lot, is what about influences on child? Because we know that adults can and do influence child preferences. So there has to be some people who are very particularly skilled in discerning these kinds of things, and they have to engage their very specific skill set to understand preferences versus the desire to avoid contact. So in contested custody cases, we often see a lot of allegations of abuse, domestic violence, child maltreatment, and some of those instances of or allegations of child maltreatment could be retaliatory. And so a child's attorney is actually very effective at being able to understand the child, understand where they are developmentally, and know how to engage them in a meaningful way. And it actually prevents the ability for parents to impose their conflict upon the child. So the child's attorney can not only discern between these complex issues, but they can also serve as almost a barrier between the parent conflict and the child. They can help the child better express their reasons or thoughts behind a preference. We can also identify coercion. So children's attorneys, they are trained to ask the right questions in the right way at the right time. And it's not to say that other professionals are not able to do this, but when a child's attorney is appointed to the child, then they don't have to navigate their alliances or allegiances with the state statute, with the judge, with other attorneys in the process. They are only obligated to that child. And that allows them to fully focus on what the right questions are, how to ask them the right way, and how to do that at specifically the right time to get at any sort of underlying factor, such as whether or not a parent is influencing a child. But also, most importantly, child's attorneys partner with mental health professionals. They do not do it alone. They have a team of mental health professionals that support the process and support the child throughout the process. Next slide, please. And here's my lengthy list of references in case anybody wants to get out a magnifying glass and look at that tiny font. I do believe that the slides will be sent out afterwards if you are interested in reading any more materials on this. And it is at this time that I will take any questions that you have, but I also just want to leave you with one final thought, is that Kansas is incredibly progressive in the way and innovative in the way that we allocate child prevention and maltreatment prevention funds. we are very innovative in trying a lot of different things. We have one of the most diverse service arrays of any state that exists, which we should be incredibly proud of. And the Child's Voice Project just illuminates one more way that we can help children and families, and do so effectively, and do so in a way that reduces the burden on children and families, reduces their economic strain, and really promotes quality outcomes, even in the face of crisis. And so in the future, as we keep the ball rolling on our preventative legal services projects, keep in tune and keep listening to what might be going on, because we're always trying to partner with early childhood providers, because we know that you are essentially the gatekeepers of the community. You are the ones that have the most contact and the most experience with families. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about this process.
Steph, I have a couple questions in the chat, which potentially can sort of link together. So one is, how do we assist families in obtaining these services? And more specifically, how do you see childcare providers helping with this process?
Yes. So the first question is, how do we help them in assisting these services? I think one way that we can do that is by making sure that you all have information about all of the child maltreatment prevention programs that we have going on in the state of Kansas, and helping make sure that you all are aware, which is partly why I'm here today, is to help everybody be a little bit more aware of the services that we do have available. And so I would love after this to send you all some information about our preventative legal service projects. If you are in any of the counties currently served, you would just be able to have them contact the program. And they are currently not turning away any clients, which is very exciting. We are not at capacity. So we see you all helping by just being in the know that this is an option, that if you see a family struggling and you find that there is an opportunity to ask a question, or if a parent shares something with you, or if a child shares something with you, you're all right there with the families alongside them. And so you're really best positioned to say, hey, I actually heard about this program or this service that might be able to help you. I don't know if you need legal services, but if you do, we actually have some in the state that are free. I'd love to share this information with you. Here's the number that you can call. So, really the first step is we really need to get information in your hands. And hopefully after this presentation, it will make a little bit more sense as to why we're sending that information out. You'll have some context. But then as you serve families, you are able to say, I actually know about a thing that can help you with that. Because childcare providers are like the Rolodex. Did I just date myself by saying Rolodex? Childcare providers, early childhood providers, you are the Rolodex of all of the community services. You have so much information in your back pocket, and families share things with you. So you have a unique opportunity to just get them connected with programs that we have here in the state of Kansas. I'm glad I'm not the only one that remembers a Rolodex. Makes me happy. Are there any other questions I can answer for you about this program, about our preventative legal services in the state of Kansas? Also, if any of you are particular champions of this work, Julia, would you mind dropping the Child Voice email into the chat? If any of you are like, this sounds really cool, I'd love to stay in contact, we would love to stay in contact with you too. Feel free to shoot us an email at our Child's Voice project email. And that will just tell us to stay in contact with you, because we are always looking for more opportunities to partner with folks, specifically early childhood providers, just because we know that you all are essentially you are the ones that get all of the people and know all of the things. So if you are very interested, please do shoot us an email. Just, hey, I saw your webinar. I'd love to stay in contact. Because one of the things that we would really love to be able to do down the road is pilot more preventative legal services, or partner with you to better understand the people that you serve and the kinds of legal issues they might face. We know that you are also hosts to a lot of information, and you are essentially like community experts. So you might hear us poking you from time to time saying, hey, would you like to participate in a focus group where we ask you a bunch of questions so we can learn more about the things that we don't even know to ask about. So those are kind of the ways that you would maybe expect to hear from us. I would absolutely do a training for a group of childcare providers. Feel free to use that Child's Voice email and reach out. I'm passionate about this kind of work and I love talking about it. I could talk about it for a very long time. So if you are ever interested in gathering a group of people to hear my whole song and dance, I actually won't dance. I promise I won't punish you in that way. But I might sing a song if you're lucky. But if you're interested in gathering a group of people that could benefit from this information, I am always available and willing to talk about it and talk about how we can actually come together and form really, more strong community partnerships. I feel like we are especially lucky here in Kansas. We have extremely tight-knit social networks professionally. And we're always able to leverage those to do more and better work. So if you're ever interested in being a part of that in any way, please do let us know.
Steph, thank you so much. That was insightful and informative, and I think we all definitely learned something. So as Steph said, go ahead and email the Child's Voice at ku.edu if you have any further questions or anything else to kind of say about that.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All righty. Early childhood conferences, some professional development opportunities. We have a couple different ones up here this month to highlight. Again, if you are looking to schedule a vacation and want to keep it informative and kind of, use it to build your work repertoire, there are some early childhood conferences happening across the United States. First, we have Build 2023. They are hosting a early childhood conference from July 11th through the 13th in Anaheim, California. This is put on by the Build Initiative, Strong Foundations for Our Youngest Children. Their conference theme this year is Strengthening Systems, Improving Quality, and Advancing Equity. There will be over 150 sessions offered in this 3-day conference, all exploring access to high quality programs and services, leadership development and capacity building, and sustainability and improvement in programs and systems. You can find the entire conference schedule as well as the link to register in the chat. Thank you for that, Lindsay. And as you can see on my slide, the registration fee for that conference is set at $650. Next up is the National Association for the Education of Young Children's annual conference happening in Nashville, Tennessee from November 15th through the 18th. Registration and housing information for that one is not up yet, but will be soon on their website. But something that they're currently offering that is kind of neat and interesting, they're offering virtual sessions from their 2022 annual conference at a price. You can sign up for these sessions individually at $30 a piece if you are a member, or $245 for all 9 of the sessions. And if you are a non-member, you can sign up to take any of their sessions for $35 a piece and $285 for all 9 of those sessions. Lindsay will be putting that conference sessions list link in the chat, so you can take a look there and see if there might be anything that you would be interested in taking. And they will get you a certificate of completion after each one of those sessions. Also in the chat, we'll put the major list of all upcoming conferences that you can also find on the Children's Cabinet website. Next, Kansas Parents as Teachers Association is wrapping up this monthly training series that they started. They were offering free trainings to teachers and educators who are current Kansas Parents as Teachers Association members. If you are not a member and are interested in becoming one, you can take advantage of that, and the registration link will be put in the chat for you. Each month, they featured a different topic relevant to early childhood and family issues. Their last one in this training series is today, actually, right after this webinar at 1 p.m. So if anyone is interested in last minute registering for that one, it's on substance use disorder and its impact on parent-child attachment. So the registration link for that will be put in the chat as well, if you want to hop off of this webinar and join that one right after. Next are our training opportunities. As always, we have our Kansas child care training opportunities with Casito. They offer a wide variety of trainings and other professional development opportunities for early child care and education professionals. They also have some scholarships available that you can peruse on their website and see if any of them would be relevant to you and match your needs. And always the Kansas Children's Service League. Since they were founded in 1893, it has been KCSL's mission to protect and promote the well-being of children, working to create and restore healthy parent-child relationships. They have their annual Governor's Conference coming up. KCSL, along with 20 plus co-sponsoring organizations, presents one of the most comprehensive conferences in Kansas about the prevention of child maltreatment. They are committed to featuring the best speakers in the field, and they address current topics and issues at this annual Governor's Conference for the prevention of child abuse and neglect. That will happen in person in Wichita at the Hyatt Regency Hotel from October 18th through the 20th. They also have their Parent Leadership Conference that's coming up. More information on that will be on their website. But the Parent Leadership Conference is a free event designed to help strengthen the voice of Kansas parents. The conference brings national speakers as well as statewide experts to collaborate with parents on issues that are important to families. This experience will provide a unique opportunity for parents in the area to network as well as to educate the professionals. And then Greenbush, they're an educational service center that has a wide variety of virtual and in-person trainings, workshops, conferences, and continuing education for educators in Kansas. You can find out more about Greenbush and explore their calendar of events that Lindsay will put a link to in the chat for you. And then lastly, our reminders and next steps for our upcoming meetings. We have the Early Childhood Recommendations panel that will be live streamed on YouTube on Friday, May 19th from 9 to 11:30 a.m. We have our Children's Cabinet meeting, our regularly scheduled one for Friday, June 2nd from 9 to noon. And then we have an additional special Children's Cabinet meeting on Friday, June 23rd from 1 to 3 p.m. That they will be approving childcare capacity accelerator grants at. And then our next early childhood systems building webinar is on Wednesday, June 14th from 12 to 1 p.m. You can find all of these meetings and the recordings on our Children's Cabinet YouTube channel. You can also watch the live streams from the YouTube channel as well. But that is always a good place to go to check out recordings from previous meetings. That is really all we have for you today. So we'll be giving you back 15 minutes of your day. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their Wednesday. As always, you can sign up for the All In for Kansas Kids newsletter. You can follow us on Twitter at KCCTF, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.